Welcome to week 3 of Ari on TV. I'm Miss Jess, and this week our show is called Listening to Nature. We have some amazing guests and some fun stuff to learn. But first, welcome to this quiet place of beauty. We come from busy things, pausing for a moment for the thoughts that quiet brings. Our chalice lighter this week is Charlie.
This chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action.
Thanks, Charlie. Have you ever listened to a cricket? It sounds something like this. One thing most people wonder about crickets is, why do they chirp? And how do they make that noise? When we're listening deeply in the evening, we can often hear crickets. It's one of the sounds of the night. Listening deeply to the sounds of nature makes us feel calm. Listening deeply can heal. It can remind us that our life doesn't have to be so busy, right? And that we can stay connected to the web of life. We can rest gently knowing we are interconnected with all of nature. In your family email this week, I'm sharing a video called Cricket Symphony with you. Make sure you don't miss it because you'll be able to hear the sounds of nature and crickets in a way that you never thought possible. So keep an eye out for that email. And in the meantime, here's Mr. Jack with a story about nature.
Henry David Thoreau and the Still Small Voice. Henry sat in front of his little cabin on one of his 3 chairs listening to the evening. If you were there, you might have thought there was nothing to listen to. Certainly no television or iPod. Those wouldn't be around for 100 years or more. There was no one to talk with, no airplanes overhead, no radio coming from next door. Mr. Emerson's house, the closest thing to a next-door neighbor, was over a mile away. Not that he had a radio to play in any case. Even the natural world was still. No wind rippled the pond, and the birds had stopped singing as night approached. Still, Henry listened for the tiniest sounds. A small fish breaking the surface of the water and splashing down again. The crackle of leaves as a mouse passed by. The sound of wings as a crow passed overhead. To him, these miniature sounds were music. Of course, most of the townspeople thought Henry David Thoreau was crazy when he decided to build a tiny cabin from used materials out in Emerson's woodlot by Walden Pond. Why would a promising writer want to move away from society to sit with birds and bugs for company? In fact, Henry enjoyed the company of Emerson and the other thinkers who shared his transcendentalist philosophy. However, to him the quiet of the pond and the animals and plants that lived in and around it provided excellent company. Sometimes, Henry thought, the conversation you learn the most from is the one in which the least is said. As he watched the last rays of light glisten on the pond, Henry thought about the biblical story about the prophet Elijah, who crawled off to a mountain cave to listen for what God wanted him to do. While Elijah sat outside the cave, a great wind whipped around the mountains, sending boulders crashing to the ground in the fury of its passing. But God wasn't in the wind. Then an earthquake rattled the mountain with a terrific rumbling. But God wasn't in the earthquake. Then came a fire sweeping across the rocks and brush outside the cave, red and roaring and grand. But God wasn't in the fire either. Finally, after all the roaring and crashing, everything became quiet. Elijah stood there shaking, wrapped in his cloak, just waiting. And out of the silence came the still, small voice of his God. I'm not sure at all, thought Henry, that I believe in the God of the Bible, the one who chatted with Elijah. But whatever God is, I'm pretty sure I know it better out here in the quiet than I would through any ranting sermon. Maybe God is speaking to me in the small voice of the jumping fish, and the rustling leaves, and the still pond and the stars beginning to peek through the trees. Maybe I hear God when my heart is still, and I can listen with my very smallest inner ear. Maybe. And his thoughts drifted off with a small breeze that came and ruffled his hair and rippled across the quiet lake.
Thank you, Mr. Jack. Is it hard to listen to nature where you live? What nature sounds are the most calming to you? If you need a little bit more practice with deep listening, I have some good news for you. Miss Leah is back to help us with our deep listening.
I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. My hands are wide open, eyes are wide open to see what I may be. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me.
Are you ready to listen some more? I hope so, because Mr. Paul is here to help us learn more about nature. Mr. Paul?
Hey, you kids. My name is Paul, and like you, I grew up a Unitarian child, and often wondered why when other worship and churches were talking about Jesus and other religious figures, we were learning about nature. And it's because we're all interconnected, and we worship that interconnectedness. Today we're going to talk about deep listening to nature that helps us heal and calms us and reminds us of that interconnectedness. When we hear and notice crickets in the evening, we're transported to that web of life. We're reminded that we're part of a family of wonderful creatures. You might even say we're part of a choir of creatures. Have you ever listened to a cricket? It sounds something like this. And that's not a coincidence. But first, a little background. So, millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, before even dinosaurs, there was a major split in the animal kingdom. One half had their skeletons on the inside, like us. We have backbones, so we're called the vertebrate. The other half of the animal kingdom had their skeletons on the outside. They're called invertebrates. And you think of lobsters and crabs, you can see why the skeleton on the outside might be beneficial. It helps protect them against attack. But it also, once those crabs and lobsters came on shore and became insects, caused a lot of problems. One is, a skeleton on the outside is really heavy and hard to carry around, so they don't get very big. Not like dinosaurs that had backbones and could become huge. The other thing is, they don't breathe like we do and have a circulatory system quite like we do. So it's hard for them to get air into their muscles. You need air to make your muscles work, oxygen. So they have little holes all over where their muscle attachments are called spiracles, and the oxygen gets in there and provides those muscles with air. So although these holes work to let air into where their muscles are, they also lose a lot of water. So insects have a real problem with moisture. And unlike us, they don't have lungs, so they can't breathe out and make the sounds that we can make. You're hearing my voice now because my lungs take in air, they pass over vocal cords, and you hear the sounds. So insects, for the most part, are pretty quiet and find other ways to communicate. I recently had some visitors from Germany, and they had never seen fireflies. But fireflies use that light to attract each other and let each other know where they are. That's one of the ways they communicate. Ants, one of my favorite insects, also use little tiny bits of what are called pheromones, and they say all kinds of amazing things through these smells that we can't smell and are only starting to learn about. but that tell them where food is or where danger is. They mark trails with it. So these are all quiet ways of communication. But crickets have evolved to make a sound. And they use this sound, again, because they have no lungs, to attract mates and also to warn off other males that this is their territory and they're not to come any closer. They do this because underneath their wing pads, they have a little thing called a scraper. It's microscopic, but it's attached to their wing. They also have under that wing a thing called a file. It looks very much like this. It has a lot of teeth, and when they run the scraper on their wing with that file, it makes the chirping sound. And you can actually tell the temperature of the air by the rate at which crickets chirp. Because all insects, cold-blooded really isn't the right term, but because their metabolism, their ability to produce energy is dependent on temperature, if it's cold out, they just can't move as fast. When it's warm out, it can move a lot faster and chirp a lot quicker. And of course, so all insects like a warmer environment. So when they make that sound, scraping, it attracts females, which can't chirp at all. It's only the males that can chirp, and they can mate and therefore lay eggs. There's a great video for this on KQED out of San Francisco. If you type in how crickets chirp, it's a great short video that shows exactly how they make this sound. So when we're deep listening in the evening, we often hear crickets. It's one of the sounds of the night. Listening deeply to sounds of nature make us feel calm. Here in my backyard, I have woods, and there's a pair of great horned owls that come right around this time, right around Halloween, and they do their hooting back and forth, another mating ritual. And it really does soothe me and calm me and make me feel all is right with the world, even in these trying times when things sometimes seem a little frightening. So listening to nature can really calm you. I also like the flicker of the fireflies. Again, the students that came here from Germany to see that were just amazed at seeing fireflies for the first time. Running your finger along a comb is similar to the way crickets make the sound when they chirp. They have that underwing and the file, and they scrape them together and make that noise. What time of day inspires you to practice deep listening? There's a wonderful little book here. Oh, I have a jumping spider coming to join this video, called The Listening Walk. I don't know if you can see it. Go away, spider. I don't want him to crawl on my shirt. Spiders can bite. They rarely hurt, but they certainly are capable of biting. The Listening Walk. This talks mostly about sounds during the day that you hear, including birds, vertebrates, backbone. They breathe and they make noise. You know, it always amazes me when I look at birds and think, these evolved from dinosaurs. I mean, mammals have really only evolved over the last couple 100 million years, whereas dinosaurs have been around for 400 plus million years, and now they've evolved into birds. So they're really quite ancient species. But the Listening Walk talks about the buzzing of bees, another sound that some insects make. Whenever you get near a bumblebee, you'll notice they make a loud buzzing sound to warn you, to say, hey, stay away from me. And there are some there's a beetle called a click beetle that makes a noise. But for the most part, insects are pretty quiet.
Wow, that was great. Thanks, Mr. Paul. Well, that's it for our show this week. As you move about and return to your everyday lives, I hope that you'll take some time to think about what helps you stay connected to the web of life. What time of day inspires you to practice deep listening the most? Maybe it can be evening, when we can let the sounds of crickets lead us in song and in deep listening. I'll see you all next week. Blessed be, my love.